All right, ladies, welcome, welcome, thank you. This is a very nice, cozy little group that we have here tonight. So I want to welcome you for coming to Women Talk. It's, it's post-COVID. We're starting to live again and do our thing, which is absolutely fabulous. I'm just going to turn it down a bit. Yeah, it's probably my loud voice. I don't even need a mic, really. Yeah, I think I went up. Like, wait a minute. Yeah, I went the wrong way. Not the first time. That's good?
Yeah.
Do you hear it out of the speaker? 1, 2, 1. Oh, yeah, it's good. So welcome. It's a real pleasure to be restarting Women Talk. It's been a very, very long 3 years of not being able to connect with one another. And this evening, I'm so excited because I want to tell you a little bit about manifestation. So about 8-9 months ago, as I was starting to rebuild Women Talk, thinking about what is it that I want to do, how do I want to do it, and one of the things I knew is that I want to travel because I want to take Women Talk around the world and have women sharing stories all over the world. So of course we're going to do this online. We had somebody that shared a story from Mexico last week. We have somebody planned by the end of February from London, England, and I'm in talks with somebody from Budapest as well. So we're going to have stories from women all over the world, which is going to be super cool. But what I wanted to share with you was I actually wrote it on my board that's one of the things I want to do is travel with Women Talk. Now, I don't know how that's going to happen because to go and do a small event and pay for a flight, it's crazy, right? So you need some pretty big money behind you. But I just put it out there because I believe when you write it down and you say it, stuff happens. Well, about 3 weeks ago, I get a call from my niece's fiancé who does not have parents. And for those of you that follow me on social media, that little cute baby that there's non-stop pictures of, that's how much I love her, so that's her parents. So he calls me and he says, hey Bridget, I was wondering, so I just signed up with WestJet today, and I was wondering if I could sign you up as my parent. That means I get to travel everywhere, standby for free. So you pay for the taxes and the stuff, but and I was just like, oh my God, like this is crazy. And there's also other stuff happening right now in the background. So I've put a very hefty goal for myself of having 5,000 members by the end of 2023.
Woo! Yeah.
Right now, so I have a board and I've written in the world there are 7,922,000,000,000 people, whatever it is. So I wrote the number of the actual population and then I wrote the little 5,000 because it's really small. And then I wrote I read a number of how many members I still need. So right now I need 4,984. And every time I sign a new member, I erase it and then I write it. So there are things, I can't talk about it right now, but there are things happening in the background, right? Like it's just this manifestation and it's like, oh, by the way, I have a $100 bill with a magnet on that. I'll send you guys a picture. It's quite comical. I have a heart. And my word for the year is happy money. Because here's what I want Women Talk to be the way I make a living and a very comfortable living. Because making a living out of Women Talk would be incredible happy money. And I want to make a lot of money. And not because I want to buy stuff. I don't live that way. I don't need big stuff. I just want to create more of this and bigger of this and all over the world. So it's going to be interesting. I've had a couple of interesting conversations, so I might reach my 5,000 member very quick. So we'll see. But tonight we're here to talk about traveling stories, and I have two amazing storytellers that have been part of Women Talk before COVID, and both of them immediately supported me for Women Talk 2.0 and signed up for the membership immediately and said, we're there. And that meant a lot to me. So I just want to say thank you, because it was really hard going through COVID and watch this company that was across Canada just die. Like all the chapters, all the people, like it all left. It was all gone. Now the knowledge, that never goes away. So now I'm rebuilding bigger, better, smarter. But having people support me, even you guys being here tonight, that means a lot to me. And I want us to make incredible connections all over the world. Can you imagine for a minute what 5,000 members mean, or 10,000, or 20,000? That means when you have a workshop, you're sold out. Because all these women were going to support each other. Like the power behind that would be amazing. We want to go on a trip and you're single? Hey, who wants to go to Machu Picchu? Right? And you're going to get 5, 6 women out of that group. Say, hey, I want to go. So this is the kind of stuff I want to create. That would be incredible. And you have places to stay. The lady I was talking to, she goes, come to Budapest. We have a great house. You stay with us. Wow. So this is going to be really, really a fun ride. And I want to thank you for supporting me. I just gave birth a couple of weeks ago. So it's just starting. But thank you for being here. Our first storyteller is going to be Michelle Nordoff. Michelle was part of Women Talk. She came to one of my holiday event the very first time, which is my favorite one. 1 month before, that's right. Wasn't it? It wasn't the Christmas one you came to? Oh, see, why did I think it was a Christmas one?
Because I met Sam Bell, who became co-director at your Christmas one.
Oh, so then you came back and then that all happened. And then we started Women Talk Okotoks. It was amazing. And Michelle and I have had a very cool connection ever since. We kind of pour love on each other every now and then on social media. Oh, my sister, I love you. And it's great. I love that. So please help me welcome Michelle Nordoff.
It's interesting that we have a theme because as you talk about your vision and what you desire to manifest, I think about who I am as a person and where I fit into that. And so I think before I share my traveling story, I just want to say to you that the gift that you bring into the lives of others is priceless, because every single one of us that ever come through the door to Women Talk were changed. And I know for me in my own life, when I first went to Women Talk in Calgary, I went with a friend who I'd never met in person, only in Facebook. She said, come to this event. I said, sure. And I walked through the doors, and I knew in that moment it was a place that I needed to be in, that I knew I needed to be a part of that. What I didn't know in that month in 2016, just the trajectory that my life would take as a result of that very first time going. And I went back in December and to the Christmas one and met Sam Bell, who, when we launched Women Talk Okotoks in January 2017, she came alongside to be part of the team so that we could put that program together there. And I would say probably the first couple of months I'd be there with my papers and my notes, and I'm a writer and I know what I want to say from my heart, but I never really had the courage like tonight just to stand and just freely speak because of the judgments that I placed on myself. But, you know, by the summer I found that I could get up and do a motivational moment on the spur of the moment, and that was growth. That is, I don't even know the word to use for that growth, because it's growth that once you've gone through that, you will never go back to what it was before, because there's just something within, for me, in my DNA that I feel has changed as a result. September 2017, I stood at the mic for the first time to share my own journey with suicide. And that's, again, a very pivotal moment. And there are so many other stories and things along the way, just being part of Women Talk Tribe, that I want to say thank you to you, first of all, for standing in the bravery that it took when you first decided a long time ago to start your very first Women Talk event. And to know that through all the ebbs and flows of life, you've continued that vision, and you continue to be that pebble in the middle of the pond that creates this ripple that all of us are impacted by. And so my hat off to you, probably not literally because I don't know what my hair looks like under the back.
I want to see it!
But I just want to say thank you for what you have created and what you provide for each of us. And so for me, when Bridget was talking about traveling, I thought, I've traveled. My husband and I have traveled. We've traveled quite a few places. We have a tendency, however, from a lot of our trips to get just enough off the beaten path to almost get into trouble, but not quite. And eventually we do find ourselves back onto the path. And fortunately, knock on wood, wherever that may be, we have not landed in jail yet, so that's always a good thing. And so as I thought about the different trips that we've taken, the different adventures, I thought of the time that we decided to go to San Diego. And so the background of that trip is that my husband and I had decided in February that year that we were going to have a timeout. Well, I decided, and he just had to accept that. And so we were separated at the time, but we were in communication, and we were talking and trying to at least find that foundation of friendship again. And I thought, spur of the moment, I've got a little bit of extra money. I think for our 20th wedding anniversary, which was May that year, I'm going to buy tickets and we'll do kind of a weekend getaway to San Diego and start to reestablish our relationship again. And so I surprised him with this trip for two, and it was going to be like a 4-day weekend, and you would fly from Calgary to LA and then have a connector flight to San Diego. Now, that doesn't sound very difficult to me. We'll, pack a little bit of luggage, we'll throw it on the plane, and we're just going to have fun. And just, kind of let go of some of those things that were kind of creating barriers in our marriage. And so there we are at the airport. We're there well ahead of time when we're all game and ready to go, and you've got to go through that security, and that's where the security feels kind of fascinating for me and kind of terrifying at the same time. And so I'm trying to navigate my way through the security and not look like I might be a terrorist or something where I'd get attention, because I have on occasion. That may be a story for another time. Secondary is all I'll tell you for that one. So we get through to the first stop, and of course we've already done the tags for our luggage and stuff like that. We've got to drop them off and carry on. And I'm standing there and I'm talking to my husband, and we're looking around, and I looked down and I went, I have done this pre-boarding thing that you do online. Now, I'm a girl who kind of started life before the internet became a household name. And so while I have a really good attitude and I have a good, desire to try and figure out all these things, when new things come along, I'm willing to give it a try. And so you could do this. Well, you can book online to check in or something like within 24 hours of your trip. Okay, so I got in there and I'm looking, and I thought it didn't look quite right, but I thought, I don't know, I don't see like a next step, so I'll just stop here. And so there I am, standing in line up, looking at my luggage going, those tickets say LAX. So that means my luggage is definitely guaranteed to get as far as LAX. Now, are we going to get to San Diego? So, maybe I should go talk to somebody. All right, so we have to get through all the customs and everything, And they're saying, nope, you can't talk to any of us here, you have to wait till you get to your gate, and there will be people there and you can talk to them. Well, there weren't people there to talk to. And so I'm doing the little stewing and being worried because that's who I am naturally, and at the same time trying not to panic because I'm sure we could figure out something, you know, it's like just another tag, just put San Diego so it gets there. No, by the time the team arrived for the flight, they were running behind time and they didn't have time to provide any actual assistance for me to make sure that my luggage was going to get to where it needed to go. But that's okay, they had a solution. When we arrive in LAX, we're going to get to probably Terminal 7, and our connecting flight is Terminal 1. And we can just get off the plane, go grab our luggage, and we can just run down to Terminal 1 with our luggage, and it'll all be good. Okay, so maybe that'll be okay? Okay, so we get on the plane, we've enjoyed the flight. Well, I'm still thinking in the back of my mind, like, what's it gonna look like? What's it gonna look like? Can't be that big of a deal. It's gonna be pretty simple, right? Sure enough, we get off the plane. We're like little bulls trying to stomp over the top of people because we're trying to get to our luggage. So we've got a very short window to connect to our San Diego flight. It's getting later in the day. And so we grab our luggage, we're Terminal 7, and somebody says, well, you can get to Terminal 1 by taking the bus. Awesome. They'll just take us right there. Easy peasy, it's gonna be great. And as we sat in the rush hour traffic, sitting together on the bus, and we were watching all the people walking from Terminal 7 to Terminal 6 to Terminal 5 and so forth and so on at a much faster pace than the moving of our bus. And so eventually we thought we might be in trouble time-wise. So we eventually got to Terminal 1 and we're excited. Okay, we're here, we're gonna find somebody and they're gonna help us with our luggage and everything's gonna be good. We found this wonderful man, explained to him our plight, and he says, rest assured, I will 100% guarantee you that your luggage is going to make the flight. Whew. Load off our mind, we can now let go of our luggage, so he took it. He says, if I have to take the right out to the airplane myself, I will do it. I promise you, your luggage is going to make it to San Diego on this flight. Yay! And so we released our luggage and off we went to go through customs again because we had to left customs and all of that to do the walk down or bus ride to Terminal 1. And we get there and we've got 4 minutes to get through customs to make our flight. And in that moment, as we saw some guy having a fist fight with the security guards and they were shutting down that part of customs, the chances of us getting on that flight became absolutely zero. So here we are, accepting the fate that we are not going to get on this flight. And we know, we've heard the stories 100 times. Luggage never makes the flights. It's not going to be a problem. We'll just go back to that guy. We'll get our luggage and we'll figure out another way to get to San Diego. At that point, we found out 2 very important things. There was not another flight to San Diego that night, and that guy was true to his word. He 100% guaranteed our luggage was on that flight, and it was. And so as we stood there and we watched vehicles go by and people coming and going, and we're wondering, so what do we do now? San Diego's not that far. We'll rent a car. And so I had already rented a car as part of the package, and so the plan had been to go Calgary to LAX to San Diego. You get out at the airport of San Diego, you get a rental car, and life is good. We're not in San Diego. I've got to find a rental car in LAX. We get on this bus. We watch probably 4 buses go by. And they've got these signs on them, and so we're thinking, well, they must go to the car rental places. So one came along and kind of almost literally jumped out in front of it because we didn't know how to signal to get them to stop. And they stopped, we got on the bus, and we go to the back of the bus because we have no idea what we're doing. And we can see all these people with coupons and tickets and all sorts of reservation information, and they've got all their different car rental places they're gonna get off at and carry on with life. And we're sitting there finally at the back of the bus, last passengers. And the driver looks at us and says, "Do you have a car rental?" "No, not here." "Great, I'll fix you up." Pulled out this coupon book, took us to one of the car rental places with this really huge discount deal, and helped us get a car rental. And so we're, yay, finally, we're that one step closer to making our destination. And so we get our car rental, we get into the car. Now, you know, like, we're doing a one-way with this car because we're not returning to LAX once we get to San Diego. And so we wanted to make sure they understood that that was the case. Okay, so there we are. By then it's probably about 1:30 in the morning. We're driving in unknown territory between LA and San Diego, following the road signs and hoping to get there. Great news is we got to San Diego, but we have no idea where our hotel is. We've got the information of the hotel, but you know, those days, like, I didn't bring my cell phone with me, and we didn't have Google Maps handy, and of course in our moment we didn't really have anything with us. And so the only thing I could determine was that our hotel had to be close to the ocean. And my husband, being very good with directions, knew that he would have to go to a certain direction because the ocean was to the west. And so that's what we did, and we drove and drove and drove, and finally I'm like, you know, it's like 3 a.m. and maybe we better stop and ask somebody where this hotel is. So we stopped. The great news is we were only one hotel away from the one that we needed to be at. So thank goodness for all that traveling. We had actually made it almost right to where we needed to go. And so by the time we got to the correct hotel, explained the plight, and got our room, and they gave us toiletries and all of that good stuff, and told us where there was a 24-hour Walgreens so we could go shop for some of the necessities that we needed. We climbed into bed saying, you know, we're gonna need a few hours rest if we're gonna last the rest of this weekend. And what's interesting to note at this point, if you recall, I mentioned that my husband and I had been separated. And so this was kind of our opportunity to kind of hang out. And I gotta say, thank goodness it went well. Because that whole point in time, anything could have gone absolutely sideways because of where we were in our relationship. But we managed to, you know, handle all that well. We climbed into bed at the hotel that night, had a few hours sleep. I think it was probably about 9:30 in the morning. Woke up. First thing that this girl has to have is coffee. You do not talk to her, you do not do anything until she's had her cup of coffee. And so start the day with a cup of coffee, and I'm starting to wake up, and it's like, well, this is not too bad. Called the airport. Oh yes, your luggage is here. We'll be waiting for you to come and pick up your luggage. And so got our rental car. Now we know that we had a rental car already booked at San Diego, but at this point I'm kind of suspicious about things. And so I say to Brad, I am not going to release this rental car until I know for sure we've got our other rental car. And once we have this sorted, and then we'll go deal with our luggage. And so we get to the car rental place. Now, it's the next day, and our rental for our San Diego car had been technically the day before. So when she called up my name for the reservation, there wasn't one. And I'm standing there, but this is impossible, and here's my paperwork. In the meantime, my husband is standing there. There's this picture of this amazing Camaro. And it's like the newest one out on the market, and it's bright yellow, and it's got black racing stripes on it, and he's literally drooling over the picture. And she looks at him and she says, "You'll like that car, do ya?" Yes, yes, yes. And so she said, "You know, what brings you to San Diego?" "Well, we're celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary." And she says, "Oh, that's really interesting." Of course, you go back through, tell the plight of your whole journey. And she says, "Oh, this is such an interesting story. I'll be back in just a moment." She goes away for a couple moments. She comes back with a manager who decides that they would like to celebrate our wedding anniversary with us. And that very expensive car they give to us for the same price as our original booking. They found the booking by going back into the computer system the previous 24-hour period. And because of all the inconvenience and the whole thing, this is what they're going to do for us. So here we are in this bright yellow bumblebee-looking car, getting ready to hit the strip. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, I will follow you in the rental that we got in LAX. We'll drop it off and we'll carry on to the airport to get our luggage. It's a good plan. So we get all of that worked out, get to the airport, and walk into the building. And the San Diego airport at that time was quite a small airport. I think it's a lot bigger now, but I don't remember it being very big. And so you kind of go up to the first place, and you're like, you know, our names are the Nordhoffs. Everybody! The Nordhoffs are here! I'm like, I didn't know what to say in that moment. So this is the moment that we became, as I call it, almost famous. And so, as you know, on airlines, your luggage isn't guaranteed to arrive. The passengers usually do. So it was the first time in their history that they had actually had luggage arrive without the passengers. And so we became, for our 15 minutes of fame for that. And so to me, that was kind of one of our most fun adventures. And we did successfully get our luggage back, got lots of attention, and we have stories to tell, and I'm sure the people at San Diego Airport do too. So thank you.
And you're still married.
Yes, we stayed together.
Which is amazing. That was awesome. You know, that's one thing about traveling. You have to be flexible. And now more, oh, that's going to sound good when I listen to my video. And now even more than ever, but talking about standby. A few years back, I decided we were opening Women Talk Vancouver. And my friend Linda, which many of you guys know, who helped us at the convention, did the filming. So Linda says, "Hey, I work for WestJet. We can fly for free." So I'm like, cool. So we go there, we're on standby, we get in the first plane off to Vancouver, we go, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like free flying, I loved it. So we do the show that night, launch Women Talk Vancouver. That night, Vancouver gets 25 centimeters of snow. That's like a dead stop in Vancouver. So we're trying to get back, so we rent this car for like a cab ride to the airport. We get there, and Linda's going to her phone, like, because they can tell how many people, and then it was like cancel, 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 cancel. And then, so every time there's a cancellation, people get bumped. And you're standby, so you only go if there's room. So by 1-ish, it became very apparent that we were not going to be flying out of Vancouver. So we're like, well, let's see if we can fly to Toronto and then come back to Calgary, because it's all free, we don't care, right? So like looking at all kind of flights, nope, cannot find anything. I said, well, I have to be home, my kids are little, there's not gonna be anybody home there tomorrow morning, so I have to be home at some point before 4 a.m. So we decided, well, let's rent a car. Not a car to be had, which anyway would have been like $1,000 from Vancouver to Calgary one way. So we're like, well, let's take the bus. Bus would be fun, like it's longer. No bus, all sold out. So there was one that would have taken, I think, 38 hours. I don't know where the heck it was going, but we're like, well, that's not gonna work. So Linda gets back to her phone and she's looking, she's like, oh, we can buy, now we have to pay now because standby is not gonna work. We can buy a flight out of Victoria. So like, okay, we can do this, Linda. This became like the Great Canadian Race. So we hop on the train out of the airport, and then the train breaks down, so we have to go back on the train, go back to the airport, get back on another train, go out to the bus that's gonna take us to the ferry. So because we had to go back, we missed the ferry. So we have to wait now for the next ferry. And then of course we get on, now we have literally half an hour before the flight leaves from, like once we land in Victoria. So we pre-book our cab, and then we go talk to the captain, and we're like, we need to get out of here like really fast. So he gets us to get out where the big trucks come out, because if you wait for the arm to hook up to the ferry, it's really slow. So we're like, come running out of there, jump on our cab. We get to the airport, we get a few minutes to go through security, and this, like, we thought, well, there's nobody in Victoria on a Sunday night, whatever it was, that, you know. Oh no, there was a lot of people. And so I said to the security guard, I said, our flight is leaving, can we go in front of these people? And he goes, nope, nobody can bump. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna ask those people. So I'm like, excuse me, our flight is leaving, can we go by? Excuse me. So one of the lady goes, no! And that's when I lost it. I'm not very proud, but I did swear at her. I said, is your fucking flight leaving in 5 minutes? If not, I'm going! I was like, I've never done that in my life, but that time, it's now 8 o'clock at night. We've been like bus, train, ferries, like just, we made it to our flight and ordered a beer. Unbelievable. But the best part was Linda, for those of you who know her, like she's crazy funny. So we were like killing ourselves laughing the whole time. And we're like, oh my God, this is like the Great Canadian Race. And we're just like talking to everybody, telling everybody. So we made it fun. Traveling, and I think we need to really be prepared for that for the next little while. Sounds like there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Our next storyteller is Annette Stanwyck. Now, Annette has, I heard part of this story before, and I'm so excited she's going to be sharing with us, because it is an absolutely incredible story of a journey she had in Africa. Please help me welcome Annette Stanwyck.
Oh, how do I get out of this place?
Take the bus. Take the bus? Might not take the bus.
Yeah.
Don't take the bus I was on.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, you're wanting to hook me up.
I'm going to hook you up so we have great sound so we can do a podcast. Thank you.
Well, when I said that I would speak tonight, tell a story tonight, I sent the stuff in to Bridget, and I said African Odyssey, but I spelled it Audessey. Well, I think she thought, she doesn't know how to spell.
I did change it.
You did change
Oh my
it.
God.
You did change it to Odessey. So I created a new word. Odyssey is really about trip. It's about trips. It's about taking trips. But audacity, I combined audacity and odyssey, because if you're going to be audacious, you have to be fearless and courageous and, you know, to do stuff. So I've combined those two words to make it Odyssey rather than Odessey.
Excellent.
And it's my African Odyssey. Well, you know, my husband was given, we were living where were we living? We were living in Viking, Alberta at the time. And my husband was given a call to go to Ethiopia to teach agriculture and manage a school farm. Well, I had this wonderful job. I was director of nursing of a wonderful hospital, rural hospital. It was my first administrative role, and I didn't want to go, so I was kind of ticked off. But it was a wonderful opportunity for him, so we decided to follow him. And as we, on our way to Ethiopia, we stopped in Spain, we stopped in Egypt, we stopped in Greece, and then on to Ethiopia. I mean, and now those stops that we made were just absolutely phenomenal. But when we got to Ethiopia, of course, my husband had a job, but I had no clue what I was going to be doing, and that kind of miffed me a little bit. But, you know, it didn't take long before people understood that, and I'll tell you, the communication in a country like that, and we were way out in the countryside, it's like they're connected to a current bush and the information just goes. They don't have telephones, but they soon learned that I had a nursing background. And before long, people started coming and wanting my attention. Well, when I left the hospital in Viking, one of the doctors said to me, Annette, you're going to be delivering babies. And he said, you come and help me some more in the delivery room, but you're going to be delivering babies in Ethiopia. So I brought 50 cord clamps with me and a bunch of other stuff that I might need. Well, do you know, while we were in Ethiopia, I delivered 50 babies in the mud huts.
Wow.
In the mud huts. Sometimes it would be a friend of mine that would take me in her four-wheel drive. They'd come to my house and they'd knock on the door and they'd say, my wife is sick, can you help? And I knew that she was in labor. And so sometimes my friend would take me in her four-wheel drive. Sometimes my husband would take me in his car. Sometimes he'd take me on his motorcycle. One time we were going on his motorcycle and I had a backpack that was ready with instruments and sponges and water and sterilized stuff that, you know, that I would need to deliver a baby. And so I put this in a backpack and I had my backpack on and the trail that my husband was driving on, and a runner would run ahead, and it was a relay. A runner would run ahead maybe for a kilometer, somebody else would run and go, and these were just out into the bush, out into the countryside. Well, we were on this little trail, and here was coming a donkey, and the donkey was loaded with a great big load of wood on its back. And Clay thought, you know, how am I going to get past this? And he scooched over as far as he could on this narrow little path, but just the tip of his handlebars nicked the caught onto the wood that was on that donkey's back and jerked the bike, and I landed off in a patch of cactus. Ouch. Well, you know, I had some really good experiences delivering babies. What I didn't know is that they waited to listen to, and when I get to a mud hut, there was always a fire in the center of the hut, and always a very rough, small bed that the laboring woman was in. And I always had a flashlight with me. Sometimes I'd have candles. Excuse me. That was the only source of light. And the fire in the center of the room, it was always smoky up here, so I was crouching down. Delivered 50 babies. I delivered twins. I delivered breech babies. I only had one death that occurred, and that was because the fetus was hydrocephalic and I couldn't get the baby out. They had to, the baby died, and the hospital the doctors at the hospital had to remove the baby. There were 3 other nurses on the campus where we were, but they were much more reserved and shy, and they couldn't figure out how I could do some of the things that I did. There was a nurse from a few hundred miles away When she found out that I was there, she came and asked me if I'd be willing to help out with family planning or immunizations, and I said, sure. So the World Health Organization sponsored me. They sent all of the vaccines to me and all the things that I would need, and we sent a runner out into the countryside, and they'd say, okay, we're gonna be at a certain point, and the people out in the countryside knew a good central place for people to come. And we'd be there on such and such a day, at such and such a time. And I had 5 people help me, a couple of men to set up the situation, and I had given directions to everybody what their roles would be. When we arrived, there were 250 families waiting for us. 250 families. Now this tree that we were to meet under was absolutely enormous. You can't even imagine the spread of some of the trees in Ethiopia. It was absolutely phenomenal. But we immunized the children of 250 families for tetanus, diphtheria, whooping cough, polio. It was absolutely a phenomenal day. World Health Organization also sponsored me to do family planning things. So I went to Addis Ababa, the capital city, where they trained me on how to insert intrauterine devices. They gave me all the supplies, the visual aids, the charts, the things that I would do, and once a month I would have women come in to a central location there on the campus, and I would have a translator. I did learn the language, but not well enough to do it in technical terms. But I would usually have maybe 20, sometimes 30 women come and sit in my classes, and I'd talk to them about family planning. Many of them in their villages had anywhere from 12 to 14 children. So they were anxious to not have more children. So I inserted hundreds of intrauterine devices. And when we left Ethiopia, I don't know how many of them were still walking around with IUDs hanging out. But they were delighted. And I also gave out thousands of condoms. And it was so funny because all of us, I'd hear some noise out the back door, and I'd go and I'd open the back door, and here'd be an Ethiopian man peeking around the corner, and he was wanting more condoms. More condoms for himself, and of course he was sharing them with his friends as well. The other women, they were fearful. They didn't, in fact, they were astonished at some of the things that I did. People would come to my home, and I'd suture them, I pulled teeth, I didn't have any anesthetic, but they were stoic. I had the instruments that I could pull teeth. Oh boy, I got really good at pulling teeth. But they were stoic, and they thought that if the treatment that I was giving them was painful, it must be good. Well, you know, when we were there, it was the best of times. The Ethiopian people are, absolutely phenomenal people. They're gentle, they're beautiful, they're kind, they're compassionate, and they really were so grateful for what my husband was doing in teaching the agriculture students and managing the school farm. He set up a poultry project and a dairy project. We had 250 students in our school, and he set up this dairy project and poultry project that was sponsored by the Canadian Embassy. Well, the Canadian ambassador to Ethiopia visited our school and actually stayed in our home. Can you imagine how wonderful it is to be able to entertain an ambassador in your home? And he was so thrilled with the good job that Clay had done. Well, our time in Ethiopia was the best of times, but it was also the worst of times. Haile Selassie, the leader of the country, had been deposed, and the communist military government had come in and taken over Ethiopia. And thousands of people were killed during the time that we were there. I could talk for hours about the stories and the things that we witnessed and we knew, the stories that we heard. But that's not the purpose of tonight. So there was a lot of terror, and we always had a bag packed just in case we had to evacuate at a moment's notice. Well, during our time there, I was shot at. I recovered from a very virulent strain of meningitis. In fact, they took me to the capital city and had to go to the lab where the lab drew my blood, and after there was a doctor that wanted to put me in hospital, and I knew the conditions in that hospital, and I said, I'm sorry, I won't go there. So they had me stay with some really good friends in a little tiny room in the back part of their house. And it was bad. It was bad. I know that I was at death's door. And one night I said, I can't take this anymore. And I was praying to God. I said, I felt like I was being dragged back and forth, like a tightrope. You know, when people are, what is that game that people play when?
Tug of war?
Tug of war. I felt like I was on a tightrope, and there was tug of war, and I was being pulled back and forth between good death and life. And suddenly God spoke. I said, you've either got to heal me or let me die. And then I heard God's voice, and he said, I will not let you go. And within moments, it was over. While staying in their home, we suddenly started hearing gunshots next door. And there was a lovely home that had been taken over by the military government, and they had turned it into a prison. And we all dove into the living room and lay flat on the floor, hoping that we would not, there wouldn't be any bullets that would come into where we were. And we found out the next morning that as we lay there, 34 people were murdered next door, assassinated. That's just one of hundreds of stories I could tell you. We drove past on our way to the lab to get the final results of the tests that had been done. We passed a morgue, and out behind the morgue was a literal mountain of bodies. A literal mountain of bodies, and families were there searching through those bodies, longing to find one of their loved ones. When we got to the lab technician, I walked in to get the results, and the lab technician said to me, he said, I never thought I would see you alive again. He said, your lab results were so horrible. He said, I just knew that you were going to die. So I felt fortunate to be alive. But we shopped at a little town called Shashamane. And one day, Clay took me to Shashamane. He had a little bit of business to do, and I needed to buy just a few things at the little local grocery store. And so he let me out, and I said, after I've done something in the grocery store, after I've done what I need to do in the little grocery store, I'm going to walk down the street to this fabric store. Now, there were no sidewalks. It was just a dirt path, and it was pretty rough. And so I was going to meet him at that little fabric store, and he went off to do his business. Well, I went into this little grocery store, and they called me the Ferengi lady. That means the foreign lady. The Ferengi lady with the old hair, and I had hair about this color of yours right now. That's how my hair was. So I was the new Wizaro with the old hair. But they loved the new Ferengi lady. That means the foreign lady. They loved having me come in because I was always really kind to them and talked to them and loved being in there. The only thing I needed that day were 4 rolls of toilet paper. So I bought them. They were individually wrapped in paper, and I had an expandable bag very similar to this. So I had my purse over one shoulder, and I had this expandable bag of toilet paper in the other hand. And I left the little grocery store and said goodbye to them, and I said, I'll see you next week. Well, when I started walking down toward the little fabric store, suddenly a hand came around from behind me, clamped his hand over my mouth, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath, and I happened to look, and he was military. He had a military uniform on, and he started dragging me into sort of an alleyway, and I was fighting and wrestling with him, and as I looked, there was a van with the van door wide open, and they were telling him, bring her here, bring her here. And I garnered all the strength that I had with his 4 rolls of toilet paper, and I whacked him on his head, and I whacked him, and I whacked him, and it knocked him off balance, and I just beat him and beat him and beat him. And then I took off and I ran back to the little grocery store and told them, and they went out screaming, and people caught that soldier and beat the tar out of him. But here I escaped. I escaped a violent attempted abduction with nothing but 4 rolls of
Girl?
You just, you have to be fearless. You have to be courageous. And I was fighting for my life. If my husband had come back, he wouldn't have a clue where I was. He would not have any idea how to find me. And I believe that the angels put bricks in those rolls of toilet paper, and I made it out. Wow. There were so many wonderful experiences. The people were just beautiful, beautiful people. And it was fun to be able to serve them and look after them and be kind to them and gentle with them. And our daughters loved their Ethiopian friends. And when we'd have a birthday party, we'd invite the children from the orphanage that was not too far away. We brought a lot of clothes and clothed these kids that were in the orphanage, and they were so proud to have these clothes that came from Canada. Our youngest daughter, when it came to be Christmas time, we weren't going to have a Christmas tree. We didn't have artificial trees at that time. And unbeknownst to us, our daughter Mona was probably 8 years old at the time. She climbed to the very top of a cedar tree, 30 feet up. She took a little hacksaw with her, and she cut the top of that tree off so that we would have a Christmas tree. Yeah, to have a Christmas tree.
Wow, that's amazing.
Just like her mother.
Yeah. Figure it out. Everything is figure outable. Everything's figure outable. Wow. There was a really memorable, I fell and sprained my ankle when we were living there in Ethiopia. My ankle was big and swollen, and like I said, information would travel fast. And somehow people knew what had happened to me. And one day there was a knock on the kitchen door, and I went to the door, and here was this cute little shrunken lady, a senior, no teeth in her mouth, and she motioned for me to sit down. So I brought her in, and she motioned for me to sit down in the chair, and then she took out a jar of ointment. And it was, and I believe it was probably some aloe vera, because they had big aloe vera plants over there, and mixed with something else, I don't know, but she massaged my ankle and my lower leg, and I was so touched by that. Number one, that she had the courage to come and knock on my door and to come in, but to do that. And when she finished, I just took her in my arms, and I was weeping. I was so grateful for the tenderness that she showed to me. There was one woman that rode a donkey 50 miles to come and have me deliver her baby. She lived in a little teeny tiny hut that was not too far from our campus, that until it was time for her to have her baby, and somebody came and got me, and sometimes my husband would be there holding a flashlight. And what I didn't know is that whenever I delivered a baby, they would listen to what words I would say after I delivered the baby. And then they would use those words to name their baby. One time I was delivering a baby, And of course, these had that thatched roof, and it was raining outside, and suddenly some raindrops started falling right on the area where I was delivering the baby, and I said, Zanab, Zanab, that means rain. They named that baby Zanab. Rain, the rain baby. So it's a good thing I didn't say, oh damn. Or sodium. One of the really memorable experiences we had was we took a vacation to Kenya while we were living in Ethiopia, and we went on safari. Now, it wasn't a luxurious type of safari tour. We had some friends that had been living in Kenya, and they knew Kenya well, and so we rented a car, they had their own car, and we drove out to the Masai Mara, which is a very famous game reserve. Now there are no, at that time, and I don't know what it's like now, there are no fences, no gates, no signs, nothing that says animals don't go beyond here or cars don't go beyond there. You just go out there and drive around. We saw every animal you could possibly imagine. When we were driving on this dirt road, there were no highways or anything, we just drive around. And we were driving along, and up came an ostrich just running along beside our car, and then suddenly darted across the front. We saw zebras and giraffes and elephants. Oh, we saw this herd of elephants over, so you'd just go over to where the animals were because they weren't afraid of us. One of these great big males, he started stomping his feet and shaking his trunk and roaring a little, I don't know if you call it roar, but trumpeting, and started walking toward us, so we got out of there. We saw zebras, hyenas, a beautiful rhinoceros with her baby. She wasn't afraid of us. We were right there. I wish we have some wonderful pictures. Off in the distance, we saw a great big clump of bushes. And so we just drove over there, and when we got there, it was like a big mound, and these brushes and bushes were on top there. And there was a pride of 34 lions.
Oh.
34!
Oh.
Just resting in the shade. There were females and their babies, and there was a male he was off underneath a big tree, not too far away, just watching what was going on. And we sat there for 2 hours watching them. They're just big cats, just big cats. We wanted to just go out and hug them, and I'll never forget opening the top of the van that we were in, and I stood up to take pictures, and one of those females just sat up on her haunches, and it was like, don't you make a move. So I just crept back down inside and took pictures from in there. We saw thousands of wildebeests that were migrating. On the rivers, we saw alligators and crocodiles they could be 30 feet long. They looked like big logs. They never stopped growing. They were so formidable looking. The animals were absolutely incredible, and the Maasai people themselves were just, they were dressed in these colorful costumes, and they had all this beadwork around their necks and hanging down, but they're beautiful, dressed in red. Just really, and the way that they could jump. It's amazing how the Maasai people have this ability to jump so high and do wonderful gymnastic moves. We stopped and we were talking with them, and one of our daughters had little dolls, and the dolls had eyes that when you move them, the eyes would and so these Maasai people, they were just terrified of these dolls. We wanted to trade one of the dolls for a spear, but no, they didn't want to do that. Not a good trick. But in order to take advantage of the travels, no matter where you're traveling, and I know that Judy and her husband are going to be leaving on a fabulous trip in February. And many of you have traveled. It's really important to be fearless, to be courageous, to be willing to take chances. And I know that, you know, Brenda and I were talking a little bit ago about my fearlessness. I'm not always fearless. There are things that scare me. But I know that because I was willing to take chances, I was willing to take risks, and my husband as well, we had so many wonderful experiences. These other women, you know, they had children. They stayed in their homes and made meals and looked after their kids, which is a very noble thing. But they were quite astonished that I was willing to take on all of these things that came in front of me. I've always been the kind of person that if I feel the door is opening, I want to walk through it. I may not know what's on the other side, but you know, if we can walk through things, even if we're not sure what the outcome is going to be, if we can be courageous, if we can be fearless, if we can take chances, and we need to have compassion for people. And be curious. Be curious when you're traveling. Be curious. What is it like for them? One more story. We came back to Canada, and in 2012 I was invited to speak at a global women's summit in Uganda. And you know, there had been a lot of bloodshed during the time of Idi Amin. 500,000 to 1 million people lost their lives during that wretched time in Uganda. And people were hurting as a result of it. And my message has always been forgive, let go, live free. And so I think that's why they wanted me to come to Uganda to speak at a global women's summit. Well, my husband went with me, of course. There were about 300 women that attended that conference, and it was held at a nice hotel. They were beautiful women. They came in their colorful Ugandan regalia. Just, you know, I loved watching them, and they're beautiful, beautiful women. And there were several speakers, some from Denmark, some from Norway, myself, and, you know, a few others. And we had decided that we should have some group discussions. It shouldn't just be us talking to them. We needed to hear them. You know, what were their lives like? How were we alike? How were we different? And you know, as I said, I was to facilitate a group, and I said, okay, I'll facilitate and I'll take notes, but I want someone else to get up and present. And there was one beautiful Ugandan woman that was very confident. She said, I'll do it. So that was great. How were we alike? Women everywhere have stories. Women everywhere need encouragement. Women everywhere have fears. They have regrets. They have hard work. They're mothers. And they want the very best for their families. They want their kids to be well educated. They want good health care. No different than you and me. But what were the issues for those women in Uganda? They had poor self-esteem because their stories weren't important. Their voices weren't important. And they looked after the children. They looked after the house. They looked after doing the laundry, and that's usually out in a river and putting their clothes out on rocks or hanging them in the bushes to dry. They gathered wood and food and water, and sometimes that would take up to 3 and 4 hours a day. Can you imagine searching and hauling big things of water on your head, or a great big bowl of wood or food on your head? 3, walking to survive, to provide for your family. But yet those women were beautiful, they were industrious. One day in Ethiopia, I went to the market, and I had learned a lot of the language. My husband always had a translator with him. I was determined I was going to learn the language. So I go to the market. Sometimes I'd take my garden boy with me, or maybe one of my house girl. But I used to love to go there and bargain with them and get buy the stuff from them. And as I had my garden boy testify with me that day, and as I was doing something, suddenly an arm came around behind me and somebody grabbed hold of my breast. Ah! I swung around and here was this little old toothless woman had grabbed hold of my breast, and I said, testify, ask her why. I said, Inde, why did you do that? She had heard that foreign Ferengi women had wooden breasts. Probably because they saw our, padded bras maybe hanging on, and they didn't know what else to call it. I said, no, mine are real. I was a milking mother. I did breastfeed my babies.
Breasts.
So she was curious.
Oh, she was curious. She didn't mean anything. She didn't mean anything mean by it. But
She says now she's toothless.
that's right. She was toothless. She was curious, and she was fearless to come up behind me and grab hold.
Wow.
Just to answer her questions. That was a phenomenal 3 years. Absolutely unforgettable. And to this very day, here in Canada, when we see Ethiopians, we greet them in their language, and they are so thrilled. We have some wonderful friends that we get together with that, we'll have dinner with them, either in their home or our home, or we'll go to a restaurant. And I'll tell you, I was walking down, I was in HomeSense one day, and I was in this aisle, and there were some women over on the other aisle, and I could hear them talking, and I recognized the sound of their voices, and I recognized the language that they were talking in, and I thought to myself, they are from Ethiopia. So I stayed in lockstep with them until we got to the end, and then I greeted them in their language. I said, Tinestaling and Demonalu. And of course they're stunned that this Caucasian woman would speak to them in their language, and they wanted to know how. I knew it. And I said, well, we had lived out near Kuyera, near Shashamani, and my husband was teaching in a school, and I was delivering babies in the mud huts, and they said the name of the school, and I told them, and one woman said, my husband was a student at that school. She got him on the phone and told him, and I was on the phone with him, he had been a student in our school when my husband and I were teaching there. And he started crying, and he said, Mrs. Stanwyck, I remember what you taught us in health class. We've become really good friends with him. And as if I was at the kitchen sink doing dishes, I could look out my kitchen window and look across the valley, and there was a mud hut, and it had some poinsettias out front, and our poinsettia bushes grew tall, and the big poinsettia blossoms were gorgeous. That was his grandfather's hut, and he lived in that hut while he was attending our school. Today he's a registered nurse. He has 3 sons. He has a good job. Just got a picture from them in the last week. He and his whole family are in Mexico on vacation. That's the value of education. That is the value of education. And we feel so honored that we had the opportunity to be there in Ethiopia, to serve those people, to get to know them as a people. When we left Ethiopia that day, as we were driving away, as we left our campus, here again, the information had been spread a long way, and people were lining the highway saying goodbye to us as we left. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful people. So when we travel, we need to be courageous. We need to be curious. We need to be compassionate. And we need to be fearless. To take on every bit of experience that we can, so that you will enjoy your travels, and so that others will enjoy you. Wow.
So beautiful.
Take your rolls of toilet paper along.
Oh my gosh, that's so you're the best. Isn't she the greatest storyteller? Do you guys have any questions? Any?
I couldn't hear in that, what brought you to Ethiopia?
Well, my husband was invited. My husband was invited to teach agriculture and manage the school farm at a faith-based college over there.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was a pastor.
No, he wasn't a pastor at that time. He was my husband has 2 degrees. He has a degree in agriculture, farm and ranch management, and so he was teaching agriculture, and it was not until we came back from Ethiopia that he went back to school and studied theology and became a pastor.
What year was that, Annette?
You know, I hate to say it, but it was in the late 70s. Long time ago, long time
Oh,
ago, with
amazing.
absolutely phenomenal memories.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think I was sharing with you that I'm talking with this lady from Budapest. And we met through, I was in a Bob Proctor coaching program for a year, and that's how we met. And what she does is she teaches business people English. And here's the thing, that as English speaking people, I'm one of you now, but I wasn't before. Because I grew up only speaking French. I did not speak a word of English. And I wanted her to come. She said, well, what am I going to talk about? I said, you have to talk about what you're doing. Because she's so, like, it's her whole life.